Anthony Idigbe, welcome to the DCQ podcast Special Sits. I'm really grateful that you're on and looking forward to our conversation today. How are you?
I'm fine. And you, Peter?
I am actually very, very well. And I understand that today you're not joining us from your home country, Nigeria, but where are you?
I'm in Toronto. Yeah, I live partly in Toronto and in Lagos.
So that is your adopted new home country, at least partly.
That is correct.
Excellent. So, Anthony, Africa as a continent has always fascinated me. And I may have told you in the past that I was actually born in the Democratic Republic of Congo. My dad was a doctor there. He was in a missionary post. There was a hospital. After I was born there, I only lived there for 6 months. So, everything about that time really is from the picture book of my parents. I've never, gone back. And maybe one day I will. But in the world of special sits, as I know it, Africa as a continent is definitely getting a place on the map. However, for many, and maybe even most, Africa is still, a bit of a mystery as well. So I'm hoping that in our conversation today, we can sort of demystify some things about Africa and get a clearer picture of how things are, what they were, and maybe also what in the future they may become. So maybe to kickstart the conversation, I have two preliminary questions for you. And I'm hoping that those will, help understand you, your journey, and the many achievements that you've already, have had in your career so far. And the questions are as follows: what is Nigeria for you? And I'm asking this because I know obviously it's your country. You grew up there. You started your professional career there. But maybe for a lot of listeners, Nigeria is a little bit of a black box, and they may even have difficulties pointing it on the map. So a little bit of context there I think would be very helpful. And the second question I have is, who is your dad? Because I understand that he was a very special person for you, for your family. But I also understand, having done a little bit of research, that especially for the legal community in Nigeria, he was very special for many others as well. So maybe you can sort of, start with addressing those two questions.
Thank you so much, Peter. And a great pleasure to have the privilege of being on your podcast today. Now, talking about Nigeria. Nigeria is a country that is located in West Africa. Is the most populous country in Africa with over 200 million people. It's not a very large landmass, but about 80% of that landmass is habitable. It's very rich in human resources, as I've said, 200 million people. Very young in population. Average age is below 30. And then it's rich in resources, particularly petroleum resources, crude oil, and the rest. But it also has a lot of solid minerals. So it's a country that has a lot of potential in terms of agriculture, industry, mining, etc. Now, being the most populous country in Africa, in very many ways, you can say that the destiny of Africa is tied to Nigeria. But within the context of Africa, you have to place the history, the colonial history, by which we've had the partition of Africa along colonial lines, and then the imposition of languages and other.
There are three main
Yeah,
languages, but very many, dialects as well, right?
very many. Like in Nigeria alone, there are about 500 languages in Nigeria. But if you then talk about Africa, the landmass of Africa is huge. Is larger than the U.S. and China combined, right? And it has a population of about 1.5 billion people. Uh, and it has the largest arable land today in the world. It's in Africa, and there are extensive amounts of minerals. So it's hosting about 40% of all the minerals available in the world today are in Africa. Uh, yes, but again, as I said, there's that colonial past. Which has made it difficult for because of the tie-in to the colonial masters, as it were, made it very difficult for trade within Africa to improve the welfare of the people or the development index. In all these, Nigeria remains the sort of gateway to Africa, particularly sub-Saharan Africa. Growing up, one had to get over the burden of the history, right? So the burden of the history is that you're being put in, would I say, different cages, or different countries, and then you're tied in by language, culture, to specific colonial countries. And so the first thing I had to do was to get out of that mindset, right? To understand that the boundaries are artificial, right? So, and to be able to see yourself um, uh, above that boundary. I never felt restricted by being Nigerian, right? I felt that the world was my platform as well. And I didn't even feel that Africa was my platform. I felt that the world was my platform. And I had the privilege of getting to meet many people around the world. And I saw that people could move from Canada to Australia to tomorrow, and they could start a business in London, and then they have branches in 40 countries. And not all those countries are, English colonial countries, right? So I very early on, I began to understand that, for Africa, there's a need for a mindset change and to be able to locate ourselves within the world as it is, right? And that influenced, my career path and how I thought and how I dealt with opportunities as they came to me. Now, with respect to my father, he was a lawyer. He schooled in Cambridge, came back to Nigeria, set up a practice in Warri in 1947, and then in 1961, which was the culture at that time, that if your practice is successful, you then become a judge. So he became a judge in 1961.
So 1961, in October 1960, Nigeria became,
In
independent, right?
yeah,
So on its own.
on
So
his
a
own.
year later, your dad became a judge, but he already was, a lawyer before that. And
That's
obviously, the colonial power was the UK. So, it
yes,
became
yeah.
independent from, colonial rule of the UK in October 1960. Yeah.
That is correct. Yes. So he became a judge in 1961, and then he was elevated to the Supreme Court in 1964. And well, then we had a civil war in 1967, and then as a result of the civil war, he lost his position as a judge, actually. And then when the war ended in 1970, he didn't get back that position. So he went back into private practice. But in 1975, he was recalled to the Supreme Court. And then he was in the Supreme Court from 1975 to 1983 when he died on the post. But I think that what happened was that his jurisprudence was very strong, if I may put it that way. So his jurisprudence, particularly between 1975 and 1983, was impactful on the system. And I guess that's why there's a lot of deference and honor being given to him, even though he didn't stay so long in terms of the time he had for the jurisprudence, but he did establish very strong jurisprudence in different areas of law in Nigeria.
And what was his?
So we're proud of his legacy. Yes.
Sorry, Anthony. What was his view? What was his view? Similar to the view that you just expressed yourself, that you've been living with, is shed the colonial burden. There are no limitations, and we start now. Independently on our own. We're the gateway to Africa. Was that also very much the way that your dad looked at the world, or is that something that actually you more adopted yourself later on in life?
I think the essence of his jurisprudence, I would say you can summarize it in one of the cases that he dealt with, where he laid the principle that at no time should form override substance. So
never. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So he believes so much that form should never override substance. And he established that principle in one very important case, which is the case of Inlax, Maclean's and Inlax. And the issue in that case was that many of the colonial companies had long leases, like 100-year lease, and then they developed, multi-story buildings on those leases. And then subsequently, the children of the landlords who gave those land out to the colonial companies, when their parents passed, they went to court looking for every reason to sort of like challenge those leases so they can get those properties back, right? And some have been successful, including some previous Supreme Court decisions that used technicalities or form. And one of it being that you were required under one particular law to use a certain form to do the transfer. And so the matter came up in another case before my late father. And his attitude was that, well, what did your grandfather intend to give? Was it a 100-year term? If it was, we will hold him to it. And the form will not be that important. It's the substance of what he intended to give. And so we will not allow you today to try and upset those transactions. So, and that decision then had a multiplier effect around the entire jurisprudence. That you should always look at the substance of any matter, not the form.
Yeah.
He was he didn't his jurisprudence wasn't that much of international, right? And he wasn't also perceived as a like a politically motivated judge. He was what you would call a traditional judge, that had the common sense, but that showed you that common sense was not exactly very common.
Yeah, but that's interesting. That's an interesting way of putting it. But from what I read, he was also very much a proud Nigerian and had sort of ideas about. I guess his theory was the social contract theory, right? The relationship between the citizens of Nigeria and the state.
Yeah.
What exactly was that?
Well, there's another decision of his that I can speak about that inspired, and many people may not know about it. But it's the case of Ukebo, um, uh, and Imo State, and the issue in that case was that a gentleman, Professor Ukebo, wanted to set up a university, and the government said he couldn't set up a university, and then the matter went up to the Supreme Court, and my father gave the judgment and was able to show that under the Constitution, that under the right, freedom of expression, a part of the freedom of expression was to share knowledge, and that the right to share knowledge you could not stop, and that the setting up the school and passing knowledge to people were it basically amounted to a constitutional right, right? However, that the government could regulate it. However, that the right is constitutional, so you couldn't stop it. And it was after that decision that the government then set up the National Universities Commission to comply, and then to have a framework to now regulate tertiary um, um, institutions in Nigeria. That broke the monopoly where it was only the government that provided university education. So his decisions had national impact in different parts of the economy, different parts of the life of the people. So, but I keep saying that he was not. Um, uh, I wouldn't say that he wasn't one of those judges you would say made the law, that believe that the judge makes law, right? But he used the power of interpretation to change behavior, change conduct, change relationships, realign it to the correct perspectives, right? And that's how many people perceive him. They don't actually um, see him as like a radical judge, right? That was trying to make law, but inevitably, almost all his judgments had significant impact on policy, on laws, and the direction of the country.
Yeah, because what I understood was that, yeah, so the government has obligations and power, but especially also citizens. You can't just only ask things for the government. You also have a duty to be a good citizen, right? So it's a two-way street, basically,
Yeah.
is what I understood the social contract sort of meant.
Yes.
Yeah, and there is still an annual, I think, lecture in memory of your dad that takes place.
That is correct. Very popular and yeah, ongoing. Yeah.
So, Anthony, I mean, you were set to become, a lawyer. There was no escaping for you, or is it different? Because, yeah, if your dad was so prominent in a space, do you want to actually join that, or do you actually don't want to go there because maybe it's better to, do something else?
Yeah, well, it's funny how it happened. So when I wanted to go to university, I took my form to my dad. I wanted to have a discussion with him on which course I should do. So he looked at the form and he said, "Oh well, you are gonna do accountancy." And I'm like, I mean, what's he talking about? You know, he says, so I said, but, Dad, I'm not very good with mathematics, and he says, no, it's not a lot of mathematics. It's statistics. It's not really very difficult. I'm sure you can cope. And I said, okay, can I have my form? Yeah, he gave me my form. I went to school and I filled first course law, second course law, third course law. so, so I disobeyed my father.
All right.
I,
And
I,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and that was because I couldn't really imagine why he wanted me to do accountancy. I later rationalized it, right? My one of my older brothers was about qualifying as a lawyer at that time when I was making this application. So I realized he was building his empire, so he had this habit of when his friends visit, he would line us up and introduce us. So he wanted to say, meet my son lawyer, meet my son accountant, meet my son engineer, meet my daughter doctor, something like that. So, so,
Yeah.
so but then he
So
had
there was still a slot available for accountant. You marked the slot
so
of
I
accountant.
had been slotted for the accountant role, right? And I remember he had this friend, Chief Williams, who was one of the biggest lawyers in Nigeria at that time, Chief FRA Williams. Goes right. Chief Williams goes down the history with Sapara Williams, who is the first Nigerian lawyer. So that family, so. And Chief Chief Williams was like the top lawyer in Nigeria, and his brother Akintola Williams was the top accountant in Nigeria. And later their firm became Deloitte, Nigeria.
Okay.
So I think he was building it. He was building that. So my brother was going to be the top lawyer, and I was going to be the top accountant, something like that. So that's my rationalization. But then he forgot that I grew up in the house. And then I had seen the sort of respect that he earned everywhere we went. And he liked me driving him, like if he's there for a wedding or something, right? So I was around the aura of his personality, and I really couldn't think of anything else to do, just like you said.
Right.
So
Right.
anyway, but the point is I did it without his approval, as it were. But
Well, yeah, he
yeah.
suggested something else, and
Yeah,
you
but
thanked him for the
just
suggestion, but
just
you
the
did your
icing
own
on the
thing.
cake, Peter. So when I was in my final year in the university, and he went to England, so he went to Ed and Ravencroft and bought me a wig and a gown. I'd not finished school, so because he was impressed with my performance, he told me, and then unfortunately he didn't see me wear it because he
Yeah.
passed about the day I was called to the bar. So that meant at least I had the joy that he eventually was happy that I read law. He was so happy that he bought my wig and gown a year before I was to be entitled to wear
Oh,
it.
that is so, and you still have it, I assume.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, you have brothers and sisters. Are you the middle child? Where do you sit in the pecking order?
I am very much middle. Yeah, we are six, and I'm number three. Yeah, so
And
actually,
are you the
number
only? You're not the
four.
only one
Yeah,
in
I'm
law.
number four. So I'm right there in the middle. Yeah, so I have two behind me and three ahead of me. Yeah, so
Wow, wow.
yeah, but middle child in very many ways. Even though the way it has gone, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so middle child, but
Yeah, you mentioned because I read that yeah, your dad was a chief. You're a chief. You're also a senior advocate of Nigeria, which I think is an equivalent to a KC in the UK. Uh,
yeah.
what exactly is the concept of a chief? Because that's something that I'm not really familiar with.
Okay, well, bear in mind that before the colonial imposition, right, of government. There were traditional ways of governance, right? So the chief was one of the ways that the community ruled itself or managed the society. People had positions, titles, and they played different roles depending on the title that they had in the governance of this society. Notwithstanding the imposition of the colonial system of government, many communities still maintain their traditional systems of running their communities. Some of those powers have been taken away permanently, even up to today. But there's still a large role to play in terms of social cohesion, in terms of marriage, in terms of land issues, in terms of the titles, which are still important to the people. Um,
And is
um,
that geographically? Is that uh, um, you know tribal? You know what and again, you have the title. Does that mean that you have certain responsibilities that come with the title?
that is correct. Yeah. So there are responsibilities that come with the title. Um, we do have uh, uh, we do have a council of chiefs. And then we there are roles that are assigned to the different chiefs on different aspects of the society. And then we do have like a king. And then the chiefs are the advisors, the inner caucus that advise the king. And then they also have traditional roles that they play, either in terms of welfare, in terms of advisory, in terms of the ceremonies, and things like that. So
And is that
and
in
to now,
parallel with the political parties and the democracy that is there? That is in parallel also a governing system that still exists
yes.
alongside, I guess, the president that you have
Oh
in
yes, yeah.
Nigeria.
There is. It's alongside, and one of the issues, right? So, for instance, the taxing power has been taken away. So the normal civil system of government takes away the taxing power. However, there's still a portion of that the tax that is allocated to maintaining the traditional systems of government. In addition, many of those systems survive based on voluntary contribution from the people who support the system. A lot of us have to support the system as well through our own grants and other things that we do to make sure that and the system is surviving. Yeah. Mm.
And is there a legal system alongside the other legal system, the main legal system in Nigeria as well, or
Yes, there
but
is.
it's more informal?
Yeah, well, there is a legal system. For instance, inheritance, um, marriage, land, um, you know, um, um,
What about insolvency?
that talking about insolvency, there is many of those things still existing. So let me give you an example. Um, People still lend, and then they would give land in customary law as the security, like a pledge of land.
Yeah.
Yeah, you transfer the possession of the land, and then at times it can go on for generations. And then if you redeem the debt, then you can go back to your land. So that's when I did my PhD, I did make some references to those African insolvency practices or security arrangements that that exist. So there is forms of insolvency. There are some of it that there are practices that ought to stop. There are somewhere they still do. I think there are some communities that probably still do hostage taking. you know.
Wow. Okay.
So if you are owing, then they will have to take a relation and keep until you will live with them. Then when you finish paying, then the person comes back. So that's hostage taking.
That is indeed. I mean,
Yeah.
that's almost like debtor's prison from the Middle Ages.
Exactly. So
What
you
you've
you
learned in school.
Yeah. So now what the law says is that those customary laws there's a standard which was put in some of the received the English law that says that um you can maintain those customs and those traditions and those laws so long as they are not repugnant to natural justice and good conscience. So, when it comes to civil court, I'm careful now about the language of civil court, so you don't think it's European style,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
common law, right? So when
Yeah.
it comes to the regular court or the should
The
I say,
codification of the customary law. Yeah.
yeah,
In
they are
statute.
considering the customary law. They would look at whether it's repugnant to natural justice, equity, and good conscience. That's the standard that has been set. So
Luckily,
people
those
not
are very easy concepts to define, right?
they are not, yeah,
Very
because in
difficult.
many systems, there are many systems that disinherit female children. So
Right.
and that we did one of the cases my law firm did in the Supreme Court is Ikeja and Ikeja, and in that case, the Supreme Court declared that provision or that practice law in many traditional systems that disinherit um, female children is unconstitutional. It breaches the provision of the Constitution that says that you should not be discriminated by the circumstances of your birth.
Right.
So, or you should not be discriminated against by the circumstances of your birth. But this is although the Supreme Court has made that very clear decision in that case, which we did, the practice is still ongoing. Um, female children are still being disinherited. So practically on the ground, they just won't get their share of the inheritance, and it's so difficult to implement. So, but the more enlightened families are beginning to recognize they give, but greed and things like this. At times, the male will feel that if they can do it and get away with it, and if generally within the system, everybody thinks that's okay, enforcement becomes a problem. And then many of the female children may not have the economic muscle. So they say you come from a family where they educated the children equally, and it's all from the patrilineal system where, because, the children of your female child will not bear your name. They didn't feel there was any need to invest in the children, in a child whose offspring would not bear their name. So
They will be part of a different
a different
tree.
family, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's like
Because
so they will
they
not
move
invest
across.
in education. They will not invest in education for the female children, and then the system will not allow them to. And these are all traditional systems that have nothing to do with English law, right? So,
No.
and we battle that every day in the community, and we have to um, try and change it. So, like I sit as a chief. Ideally, you would have said that I would be the one to enforce those systems, but because I have the knowledge and and I didn't grow up even within my system. Although I had only one sister, um, Uh, she was treated just like everybody else, and when my father passed, she got everything that she was entitled to. So I don't believe in that system, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so you need more people to be able to change those
To
practices.
lead by example. Your family leads by example by actually
Yes,
showing you can
exactly.
do it differently. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's also why we have to engage, because if people like us are not engaged with the traditional system, it will just remain exactly as it is.
Let's go back to you going to law school in Nigeria, and maybe you grew up not in, because Lagos is sort of the big city, right? But it's not the capital city. Where in Nigeria did you grow up? Not in Lagos, right? Because
Yeah.
Lagos,
Yeah.
I think, has like, I read 21 million inhabitants, so a huge city in itself.
Yes. Well, I've I've been in so many parts of Nigeria growing up. Okay, so but let me just talk about the family first. So my father practiced in Warri, a small oil city in the Niger Delta, which from Delta State, which is the state we are from. He practiced there, and then when he was made a judge, he was made a judge in the Eastern region. And then when he was promoted to the Supreme Court, he was simultaneously, there was a Midwest region was created. He was simultaneously made the Chief Justice of Midwest region in 1964. And at that time, if you were the Chief Justice of a region, you were automatically a judge of the Supreme Court. So he was simultaneously a judge of the Supreme Court in 1964. The Supreme Court was then in Lagos, because Lagos was the capital until the 80s, right? So Lagos was the capital. But then I was very young, so I didn't see anything. I just know that the family was also in Lagos, in Benin City, where he was Chief Justice, right? But I was born in Warri about the year he was made a judge. So I actually grew up in Warri.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then during the Civil War, my family was split. My father was in Biafra. We were in Nigeria, so I grew up in towns like Abo, Benin City, Ubiaja, you know, uh, and Warri, right? So different cities. And then after the war, um, uh, and I then the family started consolidating back, and then my father thought that it was very important that I schooled in my hometown so that I can learn the language and know the traditions. So he sent me off in 1973 to St. Patrick's College in um, um, in Asaba. It's an old college, and Asaba has a very rich history. That was the capital. That's my hometown. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's by the river, by River Niger, and then it has a natural harbor. So there was always trade, and it's well located somewhere between the southeast, the north, on the River Niger, and even before the colonial times, it was a significant town because it had a natural harbor, and then there was a market, and people from all around traded there. And when the Mungo Park and his colleagues were trying to discover the where the River Niger emptied into the ocean, and they came past that place, and then they saw there was a natural harbor, they settled there. So eventually, the Royal Niger Company, which was a charter company that managed most of southern Nigeria, was headquartered in Asaba. So then they then had early education, like my sports club, Asaba Sports Club, was set up in 1864. So yeah, so lots of things, schools, all that stuff, really started very early. So some Irish brothers set up the St. Patrick's College. So that was the school I went to in in Asaba. And then from there, I came back to Lagos. and then went to the Federal School of Arts and Science, where I did the lower six, and then eventually decided to go to the university without finishing the A levels. Yeah. So I did the prelim, so I did the exams, and I went and did the prelim, which I think was one of the best decisions that I took, because if you did the A levels, you'll just do traditional subjects like economics and things like that. But when you're going through the prelim, you would do courses like philosophy, logic, and things like, which I found more useful to me.
I
Really,
look,
yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Those are great topics.
Yeah. Yeah.
I enjoyed those, in law school as well. So the philosophy of law, sociology, those things that are related to, I guess, the hard law, the rules that you have, because it's dealing with humans, right? And they're complicated
Yeah.
creatures.
Yeah,
Try to
you
understand
you
them.
miss it. You miss those courses if you did the A levels and you jump straight to go and start reading law, right? And I found that it was very difficult for the guys who came in on the A levels to compete with those of us who did the prelim. And then the best students always came from the prelim students, because they did those reason, of philosophy, logic, theory, man in society, use of English, and all those sort of foundational courses where they really prepared us very strongly, I think. Yeah, that was at University of Ife, which I think is a very great school. I was really privileged. Beautiful school too, very beautiful campus, where I did my undergraduate. And then after that, I then did my youth service, which I did with the Nigerian Army, where I worked partly with the military police and then partly teaching at the military school of finance. I taught business law. And then I finished that and then worked with Mr. H.A. Ladner, who was also a senior advocate. I worked with him for about 6 years, and then I decided to go back, did a master's in University of Lagos, and then
So those 6 years, I understood, he was a big mentor, setting you up for, I guess, private practice. Because again, is it the career path for law graduates to go in private practice? Is that sort of the most, the most popular route, or how does it work? And again, I think that you started as a barrister, but then sort of changed to a solicitor. Can you maybe, so what's the difference? Obviously, I know the difference because we have it exactly the same in the UK. But
yes,
you don't see, that many, I guess, barristers turning solicitors.
yes. Yes, you're very correct. Indeed, in Nigeria, it's a fused profession. So when you're called and enrolled at the Supreme Court, you're enrolled both as barrister and solicitor.
Okay.
So automatically you have it, right? However, the reality is that when you get into practice, you may actually end up as a barrister, even though, yeah, yeah. And I was a barrister. That you are very correct, because Mr. Ladner had a strong legal practice that was based on litigation, essentially. For the years that I was with him, I hardly reviewed any agreements, or drafted agreements. I said reviewing it for the purpose of litigation, right? So I even hardly met any clients. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, because I then realized that the majority of our clients, I was always seeing lawyers around the firm.
But
But
Anthony, is it the same that the solicitors bring the matters to the barristers, and therefore there's sort of a natural, there's one party between you and the client is the solicitor, right?
at that time, I didn't really fully understand it.
Okay.
You understand? I didn't really, all I knew was that in the practice we had at Mr. Ladner, we were not seeing clients, but we were seeing lawyers. So there were lots of lawyers, and there was no clear definition that this is a solicitor. and this is a barrister. But I realized that the majority of the cases we had were referred to us by other lawyers. Either they were trying to handle it, it gets complicated, there's an appeal, and blah, blah, blah. So they bring it to the firm, and then the client, I realized, was mostly lawyers who were
Yep.
bringing the jobs to us. But I didn't really fully, at that time, understand the dichotomy between solicitor and barrister, because there was none,
Yep.
legally,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. It was when I started doing cross-border matters and I was now seeing the clear definition, the clear division between solicitors and barristers, right? Which later, from again working with solicitors in England, we started blurring when suddenly solicitors started also appearing in court in England. You know, so
Well, audience of right, yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
it's
it
like it's
still
coming
is
down to
is
what we do.
it's an uphill battle, I think, for solicitors to
Yeah,
sort of really compete with barristers. But yeah, there is
exactly.
obviously a
Yeah,
route.
so it was exactly like that, and that also influenced my career decisions. At some point, I incidentally, when I left university, I won the Justice Orojo Prize in company law as the best student in company law. So I always knew I was good in company law. And I felt that, the 6 years in Mr. Ladner was very good. It grounded me in practice and procedure, appellate procedure, very strong on land law, because a lot of the litigation is around land law, chieftaincy, all that stuff, right? So I was very good with the court processes, right? But I knew that I had this knowledge around company law, so I wanted to diversify. So I went and did a commercial LLM, and then I went into a law firm that was commercial, which was um, uh, Rita Kuku and Co. Uh, I became a partner there. Uh, it didn't last too long. Um, but that was the first time I saw joint venture agreement, shareholders agreement, all that kind of stuff, right?
So, Anthony, when was the first time that, because companies are in a way similar to individuals, right? They have a life cycle, and we're sort of focused on those period in the life cycle where it's tricky. They're ill, there's a financial distress, and we can either rescue them, or if you can't rescue them, you try to liquidate as well as you can.
Yes.
Was that something that you were focused on already in law school, or was that something that you only sort of came across in practice? And if so, was that when you switched from the barrister's chamber to the commercial law firm, or was it later on in your career?
What I can say is that because I was very good in company law, so in the university, I knew about the life cycle of a company. From when it is created and it is set going, by the promoters, all the issues about whether the promoters can recover the cost of setting it going from the company, to the governance of the company, directorship, all that, to winding up of the company, right? So I had a strong background in company law in terms of the life cycle of a company. Uh, However, I don't think that that was enough to sufficiently focus me on financial distress and all that, and then the winding up or liquidation or restructuring as an area that I was going to practice. It happened slowly. So when eventually I left the partnership, it didn't last too long, and I decided to go back to the family firm about 1990.
That's Ponuka. That is
That's
the
Honoka.
firm that
Yes,
that is still there, right? So
yes,
that was started by your dad and continued by yourself.
that is correct. Yeah. So when I went back to the family firm, Very quickly, the first set of work that started coming were capital market jobs. It was
Yeah.
actually somewhere in the middle of that life cycle where the companies are raising money from the capital market. And
Yep.
there's one issue or the other, right? Either regulator is trying to take regulatory action because there are abuses, or, one thing or the other around that. And I came in through the litigation aspect. So I started working essentially for the Securities and Exchange Commission, defending them in their regulatory action. And that fell in very well within that life cycle. And quickly from there, I started working around actually then assisting companies to raise money, right? In the
So
stock
you start with the regulator,
with the regulator.
trying to combat abuse.
Abuse,
You
yeah,
help them out,
yeah.
and that gives you an insight to then, advise companies.
Advice
Subsequent.
companies, exactly,
All right.
on how to comply and then be able to raise money without any problems, right?
Yep.
And in the middle of that, clearly I began to see the issue of financial distress and the rest. And I started encountering financial statements, right? And then reading the financial statements.
That's where your dad comes back to you, right? Accountant, focus on the numbers, and you did that eventually.
So I started finding myself in the middle of these meetings where, there you have the financial consultants, you have the accountants, and they are banding these figures, and I'm a bit lost. Even when they are not making common sense to me,
Yeah.
I was a bit lost because I didn't really understand the jargons they were using about assets, liability, capital, equity,
Yep.
Um, and I then decided to go and do an MBA.
Right.
So
So because we'll get to all, but so you've already had a master's in law. You did that in
Lagos.
Nigeria. Now you're going to do a master's in business, so an
Yes.
MBA as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And well, it all fell in place because a business school, the Enugu State University, set up a business school right in front of my office in Lagos. I mean, it was a 50-feet walk to the school. And I'm like, this can't happen. I mean, I can't have a second opportunity to fill this gap. So I quickly registered as one of their first students. It was fantastic. And they had
Right.
the faculty was excellent,
Yep.
and it was then the commercial area in Lagos was on Broad Street. Everybody was on Broad Street. So all the big guys who had gone to all the big universities all over the world were there as managing directors of banks and things, and then they were happy to share their knowledge, right? So I took that opportunity. I did that MBA, and it
And
was
that's late eight. That is in the 90s already.
90s, yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
95, yeah,
Yeah.
about 95, 96, yeah. So I did that MBA, and then I became very comfortable in the boardroom or in the meeting, right? And then I realized that, well, first I know the jargon. Two, I have the law which they don't have, right?
Yeah.
And I realized it made me very powerful in a meeting, to just be able to understand finance and also have a good knowledge of law, right?
Yeah.
And so that was how I then started pivoting um, towards insolvency. Of course, on the way there were things like arbitration and all that came, construction law or whatever. But the pivot started going towards strongly towards insolvency because
And what was the state of, insolvency law and insolvency practice, at that time? We're talking about, late 90s. I started in 1995. So, I just started my career then. Obviously, if you fast forward to today, a lot has happened,
Yeah.
in between. But what was the state of, play in Nigeria on, I guess, what we now call special situations,
Yeah.
financial distress? Was it a practice in itself, or was it very much in its infancy?
It was in its infancy, and there was actually no special provision.
So it was, very much at that point in time, only liquidation was, a provision in the law, but there wasn't any sort of rescue or, restructuring at that point in time.
There was none, yeah. But um, I wrote a paper where I did an analysis of um, what then happened. In the absence of the law, people
Yep.
became creative on both sides. So uh, uh, for the creditors, of course the attitude was liquidation. It was always about
Yeah.
liquidation.
Enforcement of rights,
Yeah,
getting my
enforcement
money
of
back,
rights.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, and they always want everything. They want the pound of flesh with the blood and everything, right? Uh, whilst the debtors became very active, they would know they are owing, and they don't wait for the creditor to sue them for liquidation. They will sue ahead in front. They will sue first, and then use the litigation as a means to negotiate.
And to
And,
buy
and
time.
yeah, and then they buy time, they negotiate, and then when
Wow.
the creditor is feeling a bit frustrated, then he will give the haircut, and then you get a deal. So we used so litigation was used in different ways to still achieve restructuring. Let's put it that way. And
That's like, a different way of a standstill. I'm going to court to
exactly.
make sure that we have a moratorium.
Exactly. You challenge. At times, the debtors will challenge the calculation of interest. They would even go to an expert to do an expert report and say, "Well, you are claiming 100 million. I'm sorry, the actual amount is supposed to be 50 million because you didn't calculate the interest properly." And then you were charging penalties and blah blah blah, and so then they get an injunction, which is like get a standstill, and then the creditor is struggling to knock off the injunction, and then the parties start talking, and then you agree somewhere it's gonna be okay. You give us 70 million. So we had to use yeah, on both sides different techniques to achieve, and it took the law a long time to come around, leading up to the 2020 Companies and Allied Matters Act that eventually introduced administration and said that the first objective of administration is business rescue. Before it wasn't. Yeah, that there was
And
no administrator.
Anthony, what is the mentality about financial distress in Nigeria, in the business community? Because you sort of alluded to, I guess, the traditions in customary law where, we're almost taking the debtor hostage until he has repaid and you get him back. That is, that's not really a rescue culture.
Mm,
And it's, it's not an invitation to actually admit that there is financial distress, right?
yeah.
So what is the mentality? Is it very much still a negative stigma on it, and people therefore deny that they have financial distress?
Oh,
Or is it
yeah.
actually more and more something that, life cycle of a business, financial distress is there, we need to tackle it?
The stigma is still very strong, particularly in personal insolvency. So
Yep.
we have to distinguish between personal insolvency and corporate insolvency. So we made some progress with corporate insolvency with this new law that now introduced administration and says that the first objective is to rescue the business. Even then, there's a lot of pushback, right, because of the traditional mentality. But if you go to the personal insolvency, no progress whatsoever. The discharge is filled with conditions.
Yeah.
You
Takes
cannot
forever. So somebody
you
is just
cannot
burdened with it
contest the
forever. Yep.
election. You cannot do so many things. Nobody wants to go through uh, a bankruptcy. There's nobody that willingly puts himself through bankruptcy in Nigeria. And even the ones that have been filed, there is massive resistance. And even when, like I deal with some personal insolvency matters right now, where the person who is filing the personal bankruptcy does not realize that when you file a personal bankruptcy, it's a collective proceeding. They still assume that they will recover every single penny. Yeah.
Yep.
And they don't even understand that there has to be a provision for the survival of the bankrupt.
Yeah. It's
So
a human being. It still also needs to live, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You can't kill
So
it off like a company deregistered.
exactly. They don't even understand that the bankruptcy proceeding is to give a relief, to the person, right? So, we're not doing well on the personal bankruptcy at all. It needs complete reform. Yeah. And then on even the corporate bankruptcy, we haven't gotten to the level of doing something for small scale, micro businesses, right?
What percentage of all the businesses are, MSEs, micro and small enterprises?
Um,
Is it like a big percentage? Because I was told, for example, I did some work in Rwanda where 95% is MSE. So it's a huge part of the economy is small, a micro and small businesses. Is that the same in Nigeria, or are there actually a big part
over
larger companies?
over 60% of the businesses in Nigeria are MSMEs,
Okay, yeah,
and
also.
they employ over 80% of those that are employed.
Yeah.
Those that are employed are 80% of those that are in employment are working for, barber shop and small
And
restaurant.
they're all family businesses, right? Because
Yes.
you can have a legal entity, but all families members are behind it. So
Yeah.
you're dealing with individuals, really.
Yeah. Really. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
there's a need to make the procedure for them a bit easier than the current provisions, So, there's ongoing work. I know the World Bank is very much interested in trying to see if we can get a special law in Nigeria, but they couldn't focus so much on it because there was just a need to first, you know, start the process by just getting this administration system and uh, CVA in place, and then we can work backwards towards small companies and then personal insolvency, which is
Yeah.
totally non-existent.
Simplify. You have these simplified insolvency procedures for
Yeah,
MSE, which is exactly what I assisted the World Bank on a mission there in Rwanda to actually advise on that. Again, proving the pudding is in the eating. We'll have to see how it works.
yeah,
But at least in theory, it should give you the tools to deal with things a lot more efficiently. But I can firsthand, also tell you exactly the experience you just described. That the word discharge, that is, we can't, because the only thing we're talking about is fraudsters, right?
yeah,
So everything is focused on fraudsters. But again, we all know that if you design your law only for a handful of fraudsters, then everybody else suffers, right?
yes,
Because obviously you need to have the tools to deal with fraudsters, but you cannot assume that everybody is a fraudster because
yeah.
then you get nothing done.
Yeah, yeah, and the idea is to also have very strong laws that say if you are dishonest in your declaration of your assets and things like that, then you go to jail. I mean that's a different issue, right? But if there has been full disclosure and we have all the assets, and then you have ways to try and verify, and now there's greater identity trust that's going on with all the technology on national identity number, NI, and BVI, BVNs, which are biometric verification numbers. You know, it's it's getting easier to really know everything that somebody has.
Yeah.
And so that, the process should be good enough that way you say, well, so this is all the person has, right? Or the person has declared that this is all he has. And on the back of it, you have all the fraud laws just in case there's
Yeah.
falsity in that declaration. There's a verification process. Why waste time? Why can't we just
Well, Anthony, I think
get
one of the
approval
things is
ahead?
that
Yeah,
that people are upset that
yeah,
okay, they need to take a haircut because something is not recoverable. The person has a new lease on life, and that's what we want, right? We want people to have another go at things. But if they then do well, then it's like envy. Oh, well, now the person does well. What about the thing that I had and wasn't fully collected?
yeah,
I need to get it back. I mean, that's just not how, I guess, business works, right? You take risks. Sometimes they materialize, and yeah, one of the things that obviously is very prominent in our space is what is the cause of financial distress. I think if you have to believe the media, it's always fraudsters. Well, there are fraudsters, no doubt there are, but there are other reasons for financial distress as well, right? But obviously, nobody focuses on those,
mm,
right?
mm,
Uh,
mm.
um, that's my experience, at least.
Yeah, yeah.
I assume it's similar for you.
Yeah, one of the things we are trying to do, because particularly with the MSMEs, right, is that one of the reasons for financial distress is the lack of knowledge. So, for instance, many of those businesses, because of lack of knowledge, they don't know the difference between their capital and their profit,
Yeah.
right? So there's that tendency to think that every money that is in the bank account is their profit.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden there's a bill to pay.
So they
And it's
dip
like,
their hand
oh,
into it and
yeah,
then they use it. And what's very interesting is that you see that there are some of the local cultures of incubation. Like if you take the Igbo culture of incubation, where they don't actually go to school, but they get into this apprenticeship
yeah,
where you go and then you're working for your uncle or your cousin, and your job initially, you go there when you're like 12 years old, and then your job is to open the shop. For the first year, all you do is open the shop and clean up the area, and then they start getting you to sell some things to customers, and then by the time you're about 18 years old, they are sending you to go to the wholesaler to
yeah,
buy the things, and then then by the time you're like 21, yeah, even the one sending telex and emails abroad for purchases, and at 21, 22, you're even traveling abroad and having meetings. And then when you're about 25, they give you what is called your freedom. And part of the freedom, there will be a package. They'll open a shop for you. You now have your own shop. They will stock it for you and give you some working capital. And
wow,
then you then do the same. So the Harvard Business School did a study on it. And the conclusion is that that's the biggest incubation system in the world. It's there in Nigeria. Amongst the Igbos, they have that culture, right? So, and they don't go to regular school.
oh wow. So
But
it's learning on the
they,
job.
yeah,
That is
they,
sort of,
they learn on the job, yeah. So so most of the trading business they control, you know and it's through this culture, but they do that culture. And I did have a client, and he was our tenant actually, right? And so in Asaba, and he had a series of shops, right? And then he went also into business of luxurious buses, these big, huge buses. And he had a lot of those buses that were running for him. Now, his headquarters was, so they pulled a seat from one of his buses that was accidented and put it in front of the shop, one of his shops, the one that is in our premises. And that was the headquarters of his business.
Wow.
The pool seat from the bus that was accidented was put in front. Everybody comes to report to him that he sits on the seat of the luxurious bus in front of the shop, and then the bus drivers come to report. The people from the in the so and as growing up, I was watching this man. I could feel the understanding of business, the reduction of cost. There was no cost for the running of that huge business, which I knew even as a kid that everybody knew he was very rich. And then when he was renting a place, but when he decided to get a house, he got a bungalow where he did 20 rooms that he was renting out, and then he took one room, because he understood that he couldn't live in a whole flat because that will be eating up his capital. He
Right.
understood it, right? So
Yeah.
I could see this gentleman, his progress, and what it took him before he then lived in a house. He understood it because he went through that incubation system, right?
Yep.
So many people don't. So part of what we do now is to offer training, to particularly those MSMEs on how to even keep their records, how to know the difference between their capital and their profit, what they can take, how to be accountable, transparency, to be able to attract investment, how to be able to be accountable to give returns, and things like that. So there are some, apart from market-driven issues, that lead to collapse of businesses. There are some that are based on not intentional fraud, but lack of knowledge and discipline to
Yep.
manage the business properly. Yeah. So there are some who seek help when, as their business is growing and they are beginning to feel that, they need more skill, they either go and train themselves or engage people who come and help them to do it. But many people keep struggling and everything collapses on their head. And incidentally, if I would tell you the story of another. So we had this tenant on this side, the one that I just finished the story. On the other side, we had another tenant. They were very successful. They had the pharmacy. And then I grew up with the son of that one. And we were all, we did a lot of entrepreneurial things. We had a football team. He was our coach. That's the son of this other one. He was our coach. And we used to get the team together, and that meant as kids we would have to raise money, go and buy our jerseys, and our football, and then we organized the matches between the different teams and all that.
Yep.
So those were little things that taught me management, right, as a kid. And well, he then inherited, he didn't go to university when we were going to university. He inherited the father's business. He always had a lot of money, and unfortunately, he then married the first wife, married another wife, became polygamous, spending money, ate the capital, became a drunk,
Disappeared.
and the business collapsed.
Wow.
Yeah, two
Wow.
examples. These were things I grew up with, right? They were tenants, two tenants, one on this side, one on the other side.
Wow. So but that
What else?
sounds
Yeah.
all very local business. But again, end of the 90s, fast forward to today, the world has changed tremendously. Technology has made the world a lot smaller. Everything goes a lot faster, and everything is, cross-border these days. I assume that is the same, in your practice as well.
Yes.
So how did you sort of? Because you said I my practice became more cross-border. I mean, you spend a year in Scotland to do a master's there, and obviously, ultimately, you also across the ocean went to Canada and studied there as well.
Yes.
How did that come about?
Okay, yeah. So thank you. And the business, started growing. I started finding that people were coming to me for transactions that were cross-border, right? Partly because of, I guess, the knowledge that we had shown uh, leadership in. And again, one of the things that happened is that Nigerian businesses started going cross-border, you know, which became a platform for, for us, because they had confidence in us to be able to advise them, um, and I I enjoyed that. There was a time I was practically living in England, because we were trying to resolve a particular uh, company, for our client, um, yeah. So it was really very interesting. But in that process, one of the things that I noticed was that I always thought I was smart and I knew a lot of things, but I started understanding that, even when you see normal clauses, right? Those clauses are behind those clauses are um um what I would call common law or jurisprudence. There's each clause you see in an agreement, there's rich jurisprudence behind it, right? And it's either the lawyer is trying to avoid the jurisprudence or is trying to make sure the jurisprudence is applicable.
Yep.
That's why
But
those
you need to
clauses.
know it.
Yeah. So
Otherwise, they say it's a precedent. We always got to do that.
exactly. So and, there's one book I read and it said every precedent is dangerous.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because
So
especially junior lawyers don't know why the clause is in there.
exactly.
Because
So,
why it was in the previous agreement too. All
exactly.
right.
So I started feeling that I may be very smart and all that, but I need to fill that gap. I need to fully understand. So when I'm dealing with a situation, I know everything behind it, right? And when I make the choice for the client or advise the client, I know that I have a full view, right? Um and so that in other words, in summary, that I noted some gap I needed to fill. Yeah.
A gap in your knowledge,
With my
in
knowledge.
your
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I noted some gap. Yeah. Then there were also other issues around mobility, right? Remember I told you that you can have the idea that you are just Nigerian, which is a geographical expression created, and you are stuck there. And then your ability to move around also determines your ability to work internationally. So I realized that was an issue. So I needed to solve the knowledge gap issue. I also needed to solve a mobility issue to be able to position myself in the best way to service my client and to be able to extend my reach beyond any geographical restriction.
Yeah.
So these were the things that drove a lot of the things that I did, including the relocation to Toronto, to Canada. Yeah. And Canada was good for me because when I looked at all the systems, their common law is the same as ours, but I think the way they have taken, because the same way we took it from England, they took it too. But the way they have applied it is purer than the way we have. There's a lot of distortion in our system. So it works very well for me. So I came here, did my GPLLM, and then did my PhD. I got licensed here. But I focus my work on trying to service people in Africa, and also help people in Africa to service their needs globally. Yeah, so that's what we've been doing, and it's been very exciting. Yeah.
What's your experience, going abroad, representing, I guess, Nigeria and Nigerian clients? Have there been sort of, challenges that you had to overcome doing that? Is there a lot of misunderstanding about, Nigeria, as a country? Are there prejudices that you have to overcome? What's your experience?
Well, I mean, I guess, I didn't go at a young age. I went after having had very rich experience working with different countries and different people around the world. So are there challenges? Yes, there are lots of challenges, but we understand how to go through them. So there are challenges that I overcome simply by the power of my knowledge, right? There are challenges that I overcome simply by the fact that at the end of the day, maybe the critical asset is in Nigeria, right? So and I'm the expert there. Simple, right? So you can make I meet a lot of teams globally, right? But uh, uh, there's and I don't over engage. So there's one like in a particular transaction. So they had somebody they called the global lawyer, and then and I'm the local lawyer, right?
Yep.
But because the critical thing is in Nigeria, so when we have the meeting, I said, well, the global lawyer's view is this, but that the position in Nigeria is this. So at the end of the day, it will have to be the what the local lawyer has said, right? That will be the primary position that the client will take, isn't it? So um, I quickly learned how not to be the issue, right? At the same time, if the issue is positioned somewhere else, I quickly learned how to defer and to work with the local people, right? So we built a rich network, like people like you, of people we know all over the world, right? That we work with to deal with local problems in local places. The only the advantage which I have is the fact that because I have filled a lot of that knowledge gap, I can understand what the local person is trying to do. I can also offer my advice, which at times they accept, maybe because also my experience, right? And then there are certain nuances and innovations that we have, right? Or particular challenges that we have from Africa, particularly the portions of Africa that are quite unstructured, that we
So
have.
what are these challenges then, that you feel a lot of, I guess, foreigners looking into Nigeria do not comprehend, or maybe have a misconception about?
Okay, so uh, Nigeria is not a very structured system, so it's not, even though they may have rules, at every time people are trying to beat the rules, right? So for you to survive in Nigeria, you also have to know how to. Well, the best example I can give to you is if you take the innovation in coming from Nigeria around, say, the payment system, right?
Yeah.
Because of the high level of dishonesty and fraud, right? So you find that the technology coming out of Nigeria in terms of innovation is more advanced than in many other places in how to still have a,
It deals
a
with
payment system that is working.
everybody is a fraudster, so it needs to be fraudster proof. Therefore, it's a high standard.
So the technology coming out from there is basically almost fraudster proof.
It's very well built. All right.
Yes, I just the last 3 days I've been at African FinTech conference here in Toronto.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I met a lady, English lady, who was at the conference, and she works for a small consulting firm in England that is working with a Nigerian group to help them navigate regulations around payments, introducing their payment system around the world.
Yep.
Right? So they are growing global companies, right? And going international, right? Because they are so advanced in the technology because of the problems in Nigeria.
Wow.
Where they are able to develop more robust systems, right? And when I first came to Canada, I was like their banking system, like it was so inconvenient, let's put it that way, right? Compared to how we do a transaction in Nigeria, right? And it's only recently they are trying to make it a bit easier with email money and the rest, right? So, but there are so many ways you can do transactions in Nigeria and they are safe, right? But this is in the midst of a system you would regard as very dishonest, right? So you find that even so there are things that we think of that a typical local lawyer abroad would not think of because he doesn't face those challenges. He works from certain assumptions, right?
Yeah.
Which I cannot work with those assumptions if I was working in Nigeria. And then at times when I'm coming to an international transaction, wittingly or unwittingly, I bring that perspective.
Yeah.
And at times it's very helpful to do.
So it is still predictable if you know how it goes. Because ultimately, I guess, Western distressed investors always want to have predictability. So they can price risk in, right? But if you have your own frame of reference and that doesn't apply to the jurisdiction you look at, everything seems to be unpredictable. So you need to price it in hugely, which makes it, it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
But listening to what you're saying actually, if you have the local framework and how the rules are not followed, but there still is logic in the madness. It can still be predictable, and therefore you can still price it based on a prediction. But you need to talk to the right person that can actually give you the framework in which you need to look at, I guess, the issue in that jurisdiction. Is that sort of how you look at it?
That Peter, you are completely correct. Yeah, so you can easily overprice in Nigeria. You can easily overprice and and you can lose out, because you don't know the variables and how to manage some of those risks. So that's where the local knowledge comes in. So there are times you're dealing with some foreign people and they are putting so much premium on an issue that maybe from a local perspective it's not a big issue.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But they don't have the framework to actually set it properly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's
so Anthony, I mean, you have developed in your career through seeing various things, right? You've been in litigation, pure litigation as a barrister. You moved to companies law that is outside of financial distress, and then you also moved into financial distress. If you look at our area of expertise, special situations, dealing with financial distress, what would you say, are characteristics that a lawyer needs to have to actually be successful and have longevity in that area of expertise? And what should they not have? Because what are sort of deadly sins that you need to
Yeah.
avoid?
I think the first one is knowledge, deep um, um, knowledge of insolvency. And I think, there are two ways people think you can do it by just going to read. I don't think so. I think also you need pupillage, hand holding, and I will always recommend the so first you've been in an environment where that's what they are doing, right? So you learn through pupillage. Then you get to a level where you up the scale by interacting with those who have leadership in that area, and that's where I appreciate the INSO fellowship program. And I still remember, your mentorship when we were doing the program. You're coming to have dinner with us, having those small talk.
I have very fond memories of that too. I was
Oh
just,
yeah.
telling my
So
wife how we met, and it was, it was great.
yeah, and I recall, when I did my final submission, and I think it was Professor Ray Wenner, yeah,
Yeah,
Venner, that
yeah, they
and
won her.
one other German guy, that they were the guys that looked at my presentation in San Francisco. And I'd done this, came up with this idea of how to restructure this company and all that stuff. And so I'd finished, and they had asked me all the questions, and everything went very well. Well, at least I assume so. And so I was about to leave, and Professor Venner said, "You haven't said anything about your fees." And I'm like,
That is
I said, I thought I had done this very brilliant presentation. You haven't said anything about your fees. So how are you gonna eat? You mean you're just gonna make this presentation?
so that is actually a very good point. It's funny because Anthony, um, I've two sons. They're sort of now, 20, almost 21, and the other one 22, almost 23. And with the older one, I was talking about the podcast, what I do, and financial distress. And yeah, the first question he was really interested in is, okay, if there's so much financial distress, Dad, how do you get paid? It's a very good question.
So so and I have never forgotten that discussion. So when I'm mentoring other people, like, in the office, when you finish, I say, so where's the fees?
Well, but there's also, I don't know
You
what the
don't forget
estimated.
that. It's
Yeah,
important.
yeah, no, exactly right, exactly. But is there a magic to getting paid in Nigeria in this space? Is there
Yes.
ways of going about it? Because ultimately, advice needs to be paid, but
Yeah.
obviously there needs to be a prospect of actually rescuing something. Because if there's nothing, then nobody gets anything, and then nothing gets done.
Mm.
So again, one is connected to the other, isn't it?
Yeah. So in terms of getting paid, in Nigeria they are used to fixed fee arrangement. That's the primary way people get paid. Fixed fee. They don't believe in hourly billing, etc. So I do get hourly billing from foreign clients, but most Nigerian clients won't do hourly billing.
So
However,
what is because this is an ongoing discussion, forever in the 30 years that I've been in practice
yeah,
about hourly rates and, getting one price, right?
Yes.
Or connecting something to the result. But then,
Yes.
the question is, how do you define what you're doing, especially in our area where a lot of things are unknown and can change?
Yeah. So
Therefore,
what I do, you have to study the client. So I'm very flexible. So I do contingency fee, I do hourly billing, and I do lump sum, right? So I look at the client and what value I think the client is putting on the job, right? So that is very important. So if depending on the value the client is putting on the job, you can get a lump sum payment agreed, even though it's not going to take you a long time to do the job.
yeah,
But that's what you've agreed with the client. See the value that you're bringing, you
yeah,
get paid for that value. Yeah. So there are also times where the client is not ready to risk time and effort or even money. And therefore, maybe because he doesn't believe that there's a value he's going to get, but there is a value. So you could do contingency fee arrangement where, you already know, and then they're shocked. In 6 months, there's money on the ground because you had that deep knowledge that they didn't have. They thought it's a lost case, but it's not, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So you just have to be flexible in terms of how you get compensated. But the issue is don't finish the meeting without discussing it.
Absolutely. I
And then
mean, so that
what
is a
I learned.
lesson learned that you take with you.
Yes. Then you
So
said
knowledge,
you
knowledge is key.
yeah. The other
Knowledge
question
is
you asked.
also, almost like it's a given, right? If you're in this practice, you need to know what you're doing. But it's good to actually make the point that assumption obviously needs to be reality, right?
Yeah.
You need to know. So what else do you think is in special situations?
Yeah. You
Uh,
were saying. So what do you avoid?
yeah,
Um, I think you the thing is that I think this whole business is based on people have to trust you. So
yeah,
the ethics is very important. Yeah. It's so important because like um um just a few weeks ago we had a case, and so we tried to negotiate with the people. They didn't want to negotiate. And then they were trying to use their in-house lawyers. So we had one of the meetings, and I advised them that I'm sorry, it's better they get an external lawyer. That it's not working out. And then we started a winding up petition against them, and then they had to get an external lawyer. And the external lawyer calls me up and says, Tony, oh, I've been trying to reach you. Yeah, so I called him back. And he said, oh, Tony, yeah, I was trying to reach you because I've just been briefed in this matter. And I've studied your papers and I've told them that they should settle and pay. So there's no problem. We're going to pay. So, but we just want to pay over the next 6 months.
where have we heard that before?
Yeah. And I'm like, okay. He says, can you send the terms of settlement? So we just resolve this matter. And I send the terms of settlement. We signed within a week. The first payment came at the end of the month.
Oh, wow.
The client was in awe, couldn't believe it, right? So, and I think a lot of it had to do with the regard that the lawyer had for me, one, but
Yeah,
also the fact that he read the papers, he saw how strong they were, and he just advised his clients to do the needful because I'm also an insolvency practitioner. For me, uh, 6 months for them to pay, um, it's not a big deal. I just help them with their finances, right?
yeah,
With their distress, and everything is sorted out. Their business is back. We are not on their back. and that's it. So where there's equality of knowledge, it's easier to do all this restructuring, manage financial distress, etc. But there has to be trust and confidence in that process. So that's what I try to project. That if you come to me, um, you can trust what I say. If I say, and on the other hand, in the last 2 weeks too, I have been on the other side where I have assisted a client also to restructure. He's paying over 8 years, 8 months or something, and he's happy, the lawyer on the other side is very happy. He confronted me at the ceremony. I said, Tony, you have to help me. My client needs the money. I said, you have to give us haircut. He said, no. The one I gave, I said, no, it's not enough. Go and tell them, can they give me this? If they give me this, I'll get everything restructured for you. And he did. And it's done.
Yeah. So actually dealing with professionals in a distress situation, makes it easier to get results, right?
Yeah.
Because you talk with people who have knowledge and also, who you can trust. I guess for any outsider, it is always difficult to. They feel like it's sort of an inside job, right? And therefore they don't trust it. But, it's the same thing with, for example, a pre-pack sale where an IP comes in, advises on the sale, and then executes the sale. And a lot of people, the layman in the street, will believe, well, that's a stitched up job, right? I mean, they were the advisor, then they execute it. But actually, they're professionals.
Yeah.
Their reputation is on the line. If they actually screw this up, they will have no business going forward. That actually counts for something. But again, that only when you're inside, the space. If you're an outsider looking in, it looks like, everybody knowing each other, that's bad. Because, they'll just do a deal. But, sometimes that is exactly the quickness of being able to do a deal, is because you can trust and actually you can switch gears quickly.
And honestly, it works because I recall where it was the other flipping, where it was me, my client that was owing, and that gentleman confronted me somewhere, says I have to help him. I need to get a deal for him. And I said, give me this haircut and I would work on my client. And, that night I called up my client and I put the pressure on him. To make the concession that was necessary for us to have that deal. And part of what made me to put that pressure was also preserving the relationship with my professional colleague. It's also important, preserving that relationship. I put the pressure on my client, and my client was like, okay, fine. Asked a few questions. I explained the issues to him, showed him on the structure, the flexibility we have built into the system, and all that. And we got him a good deal, a very good deal. There was no, for instance, it was never made a consent judgment, because then it would have been an enforceable judgment. It was a deal outside the court, and
but there was, the confidentiality there as well.
Exactly, So it was all done very well. So he was very happy with the final outcome.
So can I ask you a question? Because people that are in our space, that do what we do, it's a job that usually doesn't allow you to just be doing it between 9 and 5. It takes more time, and sometimes it can take up a lot of time, and it can be a big part of your life. What is your profession? For your life, how do has it formed you as a person? Uh, um, um, what is what yeah, is it all encumbrant, and you can't do anything else, or is there other stuff that you can do outside of your profession?
Well, um I always have this attitude that I believe I get bored easily, you know. I remember when I started doing commercial litigation, and um so when things were still very manual, so when I get to the office, I had an in tray. So the new briefs come in on the in tray. So I look at it, review it, and then I form a team of lawyers and say they should deal with it, right? But when you come into the office in the morning and there's a new brief in the in tray, it's something you should be happy about, right? Like a
Absolutely.
new brief, it means things are moving, right? A new
Yeah.
brief. So I pick up the brief, I read it a few seconds, and I'm like, oh, same thing, and I minute it out. I'm no longer excited because although the briefs are coming, but it's like it's the same sort of issues, like the last one or the one before and the rest. So I sort of like always have to engage myself in other things to be busy, to at least feel engaged fully. Yeah.
So don't,
So
don't don't you think that is something that is a characteristic of people in our space? Is that you're comfortable outside of your comfort zone, because you need to always have something new. It can't be too repetitive,
yeah.
and it's uncertainty is something that, well, it's part of the job. You always have insufficient information, but you need to make decisions based on in incomplete information.
What I found out is that the more I know, the better I am in the way I have expertise. So I think that I bring in a lot from outside into the work. So whether it's knowing more about wine or golfing, or recently I've been interested in interfaith issues. So I've been studying Hinduism, Islam, the Japanese meditation
Wow.
techniques, and just things that have nothing to do with law. And what was, and guess what? Particularly when I studied Hinduism, I was seeing so many things there that I found useful in just explaining life and explaining deals and explaining. You get what I mean? Uh, so I am open. I like to learn, and for instance, now we developed an app called Digits Law. It's actually on the App Store. You can look for it. Digits
Okay.
Law. It's a law practice app, right? And so, like, every week, I spend reasonable amount of time with my coders, my marketing people, my consultants, and all sorts of people around Digits Law, which has nothing to do with, right? It's an app.
But okay, it's an app. I mean, look, a podcast is also a new technology that we have,
Yeah.
and it allows us to have, a conversation if we allocate some time, which is sometimes difficult to have if you meet each other in person, on an occasion. So it's it broadens your, I guess, horizons.
Yeah.
But looking at you, I mean, obviously, you've done a lot of education. I mean, you've done your PhD. You have the three LLMs and an MBA, and you run your law firm. You have a consultancy in Canada, but you're also very much involved on various boards. I guess advising and applying your experience and expertise. Where do you find the time to do all these things? It's a lot.
It's very tough. It's very tough. But um, talking about the boards, right? I think the advantage I've had is the fact that most of the time I'm leading, right? So, like, if I'm the chairman, it means that I set the meetings, I determine when we'll meet and all that stuff, so I can do my calendar, right? And then everything just fits into my own schedule, right? Uh, so that's a little
Well,
bit of
you've
freedom.
earned that over time,
Yeah,
right? I
yeah.
mean, it doesn't come on day one. You need to do a lot of reps before you
Yeah,
get there.
before you get there, yeah, but it's good to be in charge. So
Exactly.
like when you are in charge, you sort of determine the calendar, right? And everything falls. And even if something is falling on the calendar, you just change it, and you are the chair, right?
Yep.
So yeah, but it's not always that easy. There's also technology, which is the fact that we can do this virtually. You are in London, I'm in Toronto, and we've had, very lovely time together. So
Yep.
technology has really helped, right? Then, in addition to technology, I have behind me a very strong team of people, yeah, who
Yep.
just make the job a bit easier for me, right?
Yep.
And I basically offer leadership. So leadership just means that if you have people who are behind you, all you do is, oh, can you guys look at it this way? Can you do this? And then they get it done. So I always say that really, it's not that tough. You know why? This is the metaphor. I'm the masquerade, right? So I go out to dance for them, but they play the music.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then I go there and I dance for a few seconds and I go out of the stage and everybody's thinking of Tony, 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 right? But really, there's this massive, I'm only just their dancer that comes to dance when they tell me to dance. But they prepare the music, they prepare everything, right? So,
Yep.
so it then becomes a bit easier when you have a very strong team. So I'm really proud of my team of supporters, from my wife, from the team in Nigeria, Punuka, those I work with here in Canada.
Yeah, well, we have some other Insul fellows there, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okoro, Tony. There's
yeah.
you've led
Tobin,
the way there as well.
Korea, yes, yes, yeah. So, when you have such a strong team, you're just a masquerade dancing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, one of the things, so I guess technology is a big change that has, occurred over the, say, last 30, 40 years in our practice. And I think another big change in the market, at least the Western market. So, London, New York, as sort of the primary markets, has been the arrival and continued existence of distressed investors, right? The diminishing role of the traditional banks and other players coming into the market. Is that something that you've also seen in Nigeria? Because I think one of the things that for me has always been, maybe a little bit of a disappointment, or, a missed opportunity, or maybe something that still needs to come, is there are various funds that always are interested in opportunities. But when it comes to actually making the investments in Africa. There's always, well, a lot of hurdles, and very few actually can take all these hurdles and make the investments. So it still is, although, Africa is on the map, and there is a lot that has changed in the last 30 years, there still is quite a bit to go, I think. That's my personal experience.
Mm.
Does that resonate with you? What are your views on that?
Well, I think what the problem is with the distress market um in Africa right now is the very narrow exit options, right? So there is, from the work that we're doing, we can see some distress market, right? But for instance, a couple of our clients, let's say banks, they would then create like a distress company to take in some of their assets. They move the assets to that distress company, right? To resolve those things so that it can be cleaned out from their books. And why did they do it? Because um, um, the AMCOM, which is the asset management company, is no longer taking eligible assets, right? The funding is drying up, right? So they have to find other ways to resolve some of those difficult ones.
So
And
they've taken up a lot of the distressed loans, the NPLs of the banks have
yes,
transferred to AMCOM,
AMCOM,
and
yeah, but
AMCOM then
AMCOM
sort of
is no longer taken. Yeah, it's difficult to
yeah,
get
yeah.
AMCOM to take. So then the central bank tried to encourage, because AMCOM is a public company, right, owned by the government. So government strategy is to get out of that business, right? So government said, okay, we'll allow people to set up asset management companies, buy up these distressed assets, and then deal with it. AMCOM is still trying to resolve the ones that it has taken. It has not succeeded. AMCOM was supposed to have a sunset, right? That has come and passed. That is still existing. They haven't been able to wind it up. So then when they then said, okay, we open the market up, let's have private asset management companies, only the big institutions, the banks, were able to set it up now. But that's almost like, what do you call it? Because it's you setting up the asset management company to take it away from your own book, right? It's not a
Okay.
real solution, right? It's not a,
No, exactly.
yeah,
I mean,
it's not,
attracting, I guess, the capital that is outside
yeah,
of Nigeria, which
exactly.
we know there's plenty of capital out there, but it needs to find its way into, I guess, the
Yeah,
distressed opportunities that are locally there.
what the banks were hoping to do is take it out from their books, put it in an asset management company, right? Clean it up, right? Put it in a portfolio that can generate a certain income, and then now offload it to, investors, either on the stock market or foreign investors who will come in for that distressed asset, right? So that's the plan, all right? But
That
yeah,
sounds a lot like 2008 to me.
yeah. But
Slicing and dicing things.
yeah, exactly. But there are two things there that I find you need. One is you need a a very reliable court system at the back end, because if you pick out that distressed asset and give it to somebody, the person needs to be able to use the court system to clean it up and make it into something of value, right? So that cost system has to work very well. So if the cost system is not efficient, and you cannot go there and say, let's say I get it for 10 cents, I can make it into 40 cents through the cost system. That's money, right?
Absolutely.
Then the second thing is I can then package it and sell it off, issue it in a stock market or whatever, right? Right. So that, you spread it. Now, because you've cleaned it up enough that it's generating certain income. And then yeah, then you offload in the stock market. So the stock market has to be able to receive those sort of portfolio. So those two areas are weak. They are still doing a lot of work to see how to make the stock market, because if you go to Nigerian stock market now, to be able to list anything, you need credit rating, you need this, you need that, you need it's all sorts of. It's the procedure is another problem of how to be able to get these things to be listed. So once those two things are done, they clean up the cost system. They make the cost system more reliable, right? And then open up the market a little bit. Hopefully, with the new Investment and Securities Act 2025, it will be easier to then start developing products, around distressed assets. Then we can see the deepening of that market. But for now, these are the challenges from my little experience working in that sector.
Okay, but because we discussed earlier that there may be a framework that we have in the UK, in the US, in Europe, about what it is that we need in order to make the distressed investment. What you're saying is actually that framework doesn't one-on-one, apply to Nigeria. But are there alternative frameworks in Nigeria that would get you to the same result? Or are you actually saying, no, only if the court system is become more efficient and reliable, and the stock market is an exit opportunity that also for distressed packaged situations can work, is it actually viable? Otherwise, if it is not there, there's no alternative framework to actually make these distressed investments work at the moment.
Yeah, so even if a foreign portfolio company were to come in,
Yep.
right? You take a distressed asset, like the problem they're having in AMCOM. They take a distressed asset, and then there are so many of them that AMCOM is saying, we want to give it back to the bank and take our money back. We want to give it back to the bank because we can't trace the
Yeah.
people who took the money.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
can't trace, it's a useless portfolio.
That,
You
that
need,
that is actually my
you
experience.
need to
My limited
clean it.
experience that I've had with Amcom is exactly that.
Yeah,
They have situations that are very old, and then if you want to do basic diligence on the situation, the information isn't there. So how do you expect anybody to make an investment if basic information is completely missing?
exactly. So the what needs to happen is, if you buy a distressed asset, there must be a way you can release the value that is there in that distressed asset, so you make a profit.
Assuming there still is value, and the longer you wait, less value there is, right?
Exactly. So, and you need the court system to be able to release that value. Is it a property you are going to take over? Is it a factory you are taking over? Is it something? There must be something you have to take over, clean up the paperwork, right? And the system must enable you to take it over after you have bought it from. Then, to get that thing to start producing some sort of revenue stream, right? Then
Yeah.
the next thing is, what do you do with it, right? Because you are not going to hold it forever as a distressed asset buyer, right? So you are you selling it to another person, haven't recovered it, cleaned it up, and it's now income generating, right? Or do you want to then just let it run, and then you sell you sell it in the stock market to raise money, right? And you exit, and then the system is running, and then they are paying off people on the bond or whatever you have issued, right? So that you need that infrastructure. You're taking it for granted. When you speak, Peter, you're taking it for granted that because those structures are there, the market infrastructure is there. It is not there in many of these, or not strong enough in many of the African countries. That's where the problem is. This is my experience anyway.
So how do you fix it? There's no quick fix.
There's no quick fix, but we are on the way, I think. I think, and I think the first thing is to see how the SEC works on implementation of the new Investment and Securities Act, to create first a window there for people to exit. Then the second one is to see how to strengthen the position where you buy distressed asset. If you see all the powers they gave to AMCOM under the AMCOM Act, AMCOM has the power to override all existing security interests, has the power to do this, has the power to do that. They even have a special procedural rules for the Federal High Court for AMCOM cases. In spite of those, AMCON has not been able to resolve the vast majority of the ones
But
they
who
took.
runs
Not to talk
AMCON?
of private
Is it
people.
practitioners like you and me, or is it other people?
You mean?
Like AMCON, who is then running? Because you need to have experience, obviously, in dealing with distressed assets, right?
Yeah, you need to have experience. Yeah. So
Yep.
one of the things we've been doing in BRIPAN, which is Business Recovery and Insolvency Practitioners Association of Nigeria, is we realize that, they don't really have training in insolvency. So we've been offering them training in insolvency, right? One of the AMCOM people, so they appoint receiver manager. They appoint receiver manager, right, under their law. So they appointed one of their staff receiver manager. And then he tried to go and register in somewhere in Europe. And they said he was not an insolvency practitioner.
So no recognition.
Yes. So because he's not, it was not a collective proceeding.
Okay.
And so I had a training program and he mentioned it. I said, yes, that they were right because he was just a receiver manager. He was for one person, one creditor. He's not an administrator. He's not a liquidator. So it was not a collective proceeding, but he didn't understand it.
Yeah. Wow.
And so they couldn't access the other system, cross border, right? So they these are some of the
The
challenges
Yeah.
that they have. Yeah. So they have a little bit of competence issue, and then they are coming from that traditional creditors, liquidation mentality. So
Enforcement instead of rescuing things.
and all the rest, and then they thought they had all the powers and the rest. But in a cross-border situation, they were not given recognition because they were not. It was not a collective proceeding.
Yeah. So we've discussed quite a bit about the developments in our space. What things are now. If we look into the crystal ball a little bit, the next 10, 20 years, what do you see coming down the pike? And what are your ambitions? Because you've already done a lot, but I'm sure there's a lot more that you want to do.
Well, personally, I'm trying to spend more time to see whether I can pass my knowledge, so I have a visiting professorship at Christopher University in Mowe. So I right now I give some general lectures because they haven't graduated their first set of lawyers. So I think they're in the second or third year now. So once they get to postgraduate, I want to focus on insolvency to teach, to try and bring, teach uh, 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 insolvency so that they can produce locally. There are people who will be able to go into the different parts of this economy and drive that change. These issues we are discussing. So you have to produce them there. Then they are going into AMCON, they are going into SEC, they are going into the court system, but they
And
are
that's going
going
to
with
be a separate program dedicated to, I guess, a certificate or
postgraduate
degree
level.
in. Yeah,
I don't think you can. I don't think it will be well received at graduate level. I think when they finished and then they do a postgraduate in insolvency law,
yeah.
and I want to focus on that as my way to give back. Um, in terms of the landscape, I just think that it's at the beginning, as I said earlier, let me start ending from where I started. Africa just did the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. They are breaking down barriers within Africa, trying to break down all the colonial vestiges. So I expect that they've been able to develop a payment system in Africa today, such that you can pay easily between countries in Africa. I'm expecting there will be greater freedom of movement, greater freedom of transfer of knowledge. Settlement rights may improve. Many of the visa and other restrictions that make it difficult to travel between African countries will reduce over the next 10 to 20 years. I can see the economy growing in trillions of dollars. And of course, I can see a lot of work in insolvency and distress market. One of the things that I've been involved with has been I understand that it's not just practicing as a lawyer. So that's why I was always involved in things like helping to draft the laws. So I was heavily involved in all the process, either me directly or through Okori and the rest, let's say in the Companies and Allied Matters Act. We drove it initially, then we started looking for collaboration, and I worked with the ministry, worked with MBA, that's the Nigerian.
What's your experience there? Because then you sort of through the back door venture into politics, which is a whole different ball game, right? Policies. I, I have to say, I saw a little bit of that through my mission in Rwanda, and obviously, I'm very comfortable talking about the substance and sort of the technical things. But then policy issues come in, and then compromises need to be made. And then, what you think is the best law is they eat a little bit out of this clause, they eat a little bit out of that clause. All of a sudden, you have a Swiss cheese, right? There's holes in it, and how do you deal with that? Because you
Well,
need
like
to,
for instance, the model law could not get into the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020. It was there in the draft. They removed it at the National Assembly. And
that
all
is
the arguments that were made, the politics was they said, no, that they don't want it to be easy to come and get debtors in Nigeria. That was their interpretation. And when when I was doing my dissertation and I was studying, the first country that adopted that model law, that wanted to adopt the model law, was Eritrea.
Eritrea. Wow.
Yes, they were the first. And
Yeah.
then they suddenly stepped back and said, "Oh, majority of Eritreans are abroad, and when they owe money, we don't have anything here. If they come back here, they will now use that law to come and get them here and enforce foreign." And so they just killed it. It was never passed. but they were the very
Wow.
first country, right? So you have that sort of sentiment around this cross-border insolvency stuff. And in the Nigerian National Assembly, they removed that provision that would have made it easier. And when we were making the argument that no, it's going to bring business, and I give them the example like, look, um, uh, a, a big company like Dangote that has a $16 billion refinery now in Nigeria, right? I mean, we don't pray for that, but if anything were to go wrong, you don't want to go to London to resolve that. You want to do it in a federal high court in Nigeria. That's going to bring in a lot of money. The lawyers will be coming from London and the rest, but then the Nigerian lawyers will be strong on that job. So the cost will be strong. So they don't see the other side of the business, right? They just look at it different manner. So you have that issue, but we've been involved with policy like this current Investment and Securities Act, which was signed by the president this year. I chaired the committee that helped with the draft before it went to National Assembly, and I also went to National Assembly at the public hearing to defend it. And many policy issues came, and we were able to explain it. So we will continue to. So I expect that in the next 10 years we'll be agitating on policy reforms across Africa. As you know, that this November we are going to Cape Town for the INSO African Roundtable.
Yeah.
So
Well, I'm still sort of. Yeah, I may actually be there. It depends a little bit whether I can be meaningful in the program as well. I know that the program has been set up, so we'll see.
yeah,
It'll be very interesting because
yeah.
it's been
So
a while since I have been to the
African
African
Roundtable,
Roundtable.
yeah. So we are
Yeah.
expecting that we'll discuss and have that opportunity for cross-fertilization of ideas on, what we need to do in Africa, to help develop the distressed market, both in terms of policy and in terms of legislative agenda, but I strongly think we need a legislative agenda that would support those two things I've said that I see are the limitations. One, the court process should be able to help distressed assets to be cleaned up, and then the stock market exchange to be able to receive those assets, and raise funds.
And are you any ambitions to sort of be more politically involved, or are you going to stay technical and expert and not sort of move into, I guess, a whole different ball game?
Peter, I'm over 60 years now.
Well, look, there are people that are still ruling the world that are you know are a lot more senior than you, talking about tariffs and geopolitics influencing, our
I'm,
practice. I mean,
I'm
it's so
stumbling
many.
all over the place. So maybe it's the age that is part of the problem.
I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. But I hear you. I hear you. So what about, what's your sort of take on the current situation of geopolitics and how it sort of influences our business as well? Is that something that is going to continue, you believe, or is that just like a temporary thing and we're going to move into something that, distinguishes a lot more between what is business and what is politics. But now politics is absolutely dominating business, which can't be, the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, it has always been that way, Peter. Mm. Politics has always dominated business. So, because but what is politics? Politics is just only the means to acquire power. And what is power? Power is the authority to allocate resources, right? So, and once you allocate resources, you come to the economic issues, isn't it? And then that has direct impact on business, right? There's always been a relationship between politics and business because politics is just the way to get to power. But once you get to power, you allocate resources, and those resources affect businesses, right? So that takes us to the issue of tariffs and the rest. Yeah, so politics has led to somebody being in power and believing that those tariffs will help in a certain way in terms of allocation of resources and wanting to allocate the resources in specific manner. That has direct impact on business. And it could be positive, it could be negative, but whatever it is, I think our profession will be richly blessed somehow.
So we will deal with it however it
Exactly.
comes to us. We're not asking questions. We're just trying to resolve the mess that is created. Well, that's a very pragmatic approach. I like that.
Yeah.
So maybe we can close because I've taken a lot of your time. We could go on for a while because there's lots of things I haven't even touched upon. But I'm mindful that we're already going for a bit.
Yeah.
Maybe a closing question. I think that more and more the profession of special situations, is a profession in itself. It used to be a bolt on to other things, but I think it has matured. Not everybody, not everywhere, and you may need to do other stuff. But if you would give some advice to young people that are considering doing, just that, going into special situations, what would your advice be to them?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is that they shouldn't come into this profession with the mindset of a lawyer. And I think where the problem is the training of a lawyer is very limited. So the lawyer is trained to advocate for one side. Your job is you represent one side, right? You pursue the truth of one side. The lawyer on the other side is pursuing the truth of the other side, right? And
It's that
then
adversarial process. Yeah.
yeah, it's very adversarial. And then there's somebody in the middle who is supposed to say, okay, what is the real truth, right? So generally, when you bring that into distress situation or insolvency, you'll fail. Day one. So the mindset must be totally different. The mindset you bring in is that you are a CEO, right? So you have all stakeholders you have to manage. Just like how you manage shareholders, you manage your bankers, you manage regulators, you manage, different host community, right? So if you come into it with that mindset, and I think people need a little, like when I do my training, I also tell them, forget it. If you're an accountant, you come into it, all the accountant does is to accumulate cost, record cost. That's not going to solve a distress problem when you need to engage creditors, debtors, the community tax, that mindset is not going to, also the mindset of being an accountant, just accumulating cost, can't make you a successful financial distress practitioner, right?
Yeah.
You need to open up your mind, understand that it's like being a manager and a CEO, right? And that you need to get results for the different stakeholders, right? And once you enter into it with that mindset, you are likely to be very successful. That's what I can say. Yeah.
Excellent. So maybe before we go, looking back at what you've done so far, I was initially thinking that reading about your dad, there were like big shoes to fill. But, hearing what you've done so far, you've made a really good attempt to try to fill these big shoes. And, I'm hoping that you continue to do that and that we can, continue having more conversations like that. I want to thank you, Anthony. I really enjoyed this conversation. I really enjoyed your sort of, openness to discuss so many things. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Yeah, they're just talking about my father. So when I did my thesis for my MBA, I then I dedicated it to him. I said, well, to my dad who always wanted me to do a financial course.
That's right. In one way or another, he got his way. because he with an invisible hand guided you what he had in mind in the first place.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. All
Okay,
the best,
then.
Anthony.
Thank
I
you.
hope we see each other again soon.
I
And
hope so.
thanks again.
Hopefully April next year when we come for INSO, in London.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's going to be in London, right? So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
going to be good.
Yeah. Okay.
I enjoyed this. Good
Yeah.
stuff.
Thank you. Yeah.
All
Bye.
right.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye.